So now we've moved on to communism. Now, communism is, I always like to talk about these ideologies because specifically in the United States, these socialism and communism are often viewed to be exactly the same thing when they are not. If you want to look at Marx, how Marx viewed socialism, Marx viewed socialism as the necessary transitional stage between capitalism and the end state of communism, where the workers have overthrown the bourgeoisie, and there are no class differentials, there is no private property. Everyone is simply chipping in to the best of their abilities, each to their abilities for the common good. Marx viewed it as that necessary in-between stage because he did not believe that you could simply go from a strictly capitalist system straight to a communist system. There would have to be a transitional phase. Okay, so in the United States, various people use communism left and right, like it's just this is communist, that's communist, this is communist, that is communist, etc. It's exhausting. What communism simply is, for our standpoint here, like how we are going to discuss it, the true implementation of communism has never occurred anywhere in the world. In Russia, they had a revolution. Lenin was the first person to implement these ideas and try to take Marx's philosophy and actually put it into policy. And he tried to implement it. The problem is that these ideas, in a lot of ways, came from it was supposed to occur from an organic workers' revolt, and it doesn't happen. It can't happen that way because Russia really wasn't that industrialist when it was going through this transition. It's more like a peasants' revolt. Some similar situation in China. So they tried to manufacture the revolt, and then once the revolt occurs and they overthrow the monarchy, well, guess what they did? Instead of handing the power to the workers, they decided that the revolution was too delicate to be handed to the people, so you create essentially a new bourgeoisie under communism. And essentially, the quality of your life under communism, pretty much everywhere it's been implemented, depends on your relationship to the party. So the classless dream that Marx envisioned has never occurred. It didn't occur in the Soviet Union. It has not occurred in China. It's not occurred in Cuba. If you're a friend of the party, the Communist Party, and you know people and things like that, you can enjoy a slightly higher standard of life than those who do not. But under communism, in true communism, there are never classes. There's never separation by private property. Everything you need is provided by the state. That's the big kicker right there. No private property, no class, because China, which is run by a communist party, everybody thinks it's communist, and it is a communist political party, but in reality they have a very liberalized economy because they wanted to compete on the global stage. But you have billionaires in China, and if it was even close to being a truly, totally communist system, billionaires wouldn't even be in the conversation. So under communism, you have no private property, no separation by classes. All the means of production are owned and controlled by the state. And everything is provided by the state. That's why you have a classless society, is because you need nothing and you do not want for anything because the state is providing these things for you. This is a very simplified definition of communism, and you can get an entire PhD in these topics, of course. But I just wanted you to understand the basics. So when you're out there and you're hearing people call something communist, you can really ask yourself, well, there's some fundamental principles here. Is Joe Biden's administration communist, like Marjorie Taylor Greene likes to say? Well, here you go. You can check it out. What I would like for you to do right now is to do our first World 101 module right below this video. And I would like for you to work your way through that. That's going to give you a much more in-depth historical perspective on how communism, developed, evolved, basic theories. In many ways, Marx had some very interesting thoughts. He basically saw the exploitation around him and theorized that the exploitive nature of capitalism would eventually cause it to extinguish itself. Because eventually the exploitation of the workers would get to a point where they would have to revolt, that it was not sustainable. But what's interesting is that also, when you actually read the Communist Manifesto, one of the things that they're talking about is the fact that the only way that you got to where we have the technological capabilities to feed the masses is through profit-seeking behavior. So it's kind of, they sort of just admit this tongue-in-cheek, which is really interesting because so basically what they're saying is without the profit-seeking behavior of capitalism that gave us the Industrial Revolution, that gave us the ability to produce mass quantities of food and things like that, the idea of the communist state where we have enough for all without exploitative measures on workers could not exist without the advances made under capitalism. So it's kind of an interesting little thing that people like to talk about.